first military coup that installed Major General Johnson Thomas Aguiyi-Ironsi as Nigeria's first military head of state on January 16, 1966. The northern soldiers had started planning by May 1966 the revenge of their leaders who had been murdered in January. The northerners were the major casualties of that coup that was carried out by soldiers mainly from the east. To them, it was an eastern-favored coup, as Aguiyi-Ironsi's regime was believed to be extremely partisan. This highlighted the feeling of insecurity of other groups. It created more problems than it solved old ones, which led to severe criticism of the supreme leader. The general himself may not have been necessarily nepotistic. Rather, he failed to see the sectional and clannish implications of events, policies, and appointments that were made during his tenure of office. 194 days after taking office, Aguiyi-Ironsi was murdered in a northern counter coup on July 29, 1966, and for 3 days, the nation had no leader until Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon succeeded the late head of state on August 1, 1966. The immediate significance of the July coup was that it forced a return of an ethnic balance within the army, as neither the major ethnic groups, Hausa or Yoruba, was placed in power, but a minor ethnic group from the northern region in present-day Plateau State. In the confusion that followed the second coup d'etat, the slender confidence that remained between the Igbo and the northerners was shattered. Disturbances broke out in the east, but even more so in the north after August 1, 1966. The mass killings of the Igbos in the north was a deplorable act which was condemned by Nigerians, including the military governors. With the counter coup of July 29, 1966, the political development of Nigeria's federal structure took a different turn. It was accentuated even more by the fact that the Eastern Region government in Enugu immediately threatened secession if certain grievances and demands were not met. The immediate concern of the federal government, therefore, was for it to find ways to appease the East, so long as such secession were within the framework of one Nigeria. Claiming he was not safe outside the East, the Eastern Military Governor, Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, refused to leave the region for any meeting anywhere in Nigeria. In a rejoinder, the federal government too argued that the Nigerian leader Yakubu Gowon could also not go to the east for a meeting. His life, they also claimed, was not safe there either. Tension mounted, and Lieutenant General Joseph Arthur Ankara of Ghana offered a neutral meeting place. The venue was Aburi, Ghana. The Aburi meeting started on January 4, 1967, and lasted for 2 days. Those who attended the meeting included Head of State Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon and military governors of the 4 regions, Hassan Usman Katsina of the Northern Region, Robert Adeyinka Adebayo, David Akbode Ejo, and Chukwuemeka Ojukwu of the West, Midwest, and Eastern Region, respectively. Others included the military administrator of Lagos, Mobolaji Johnson, and the head of the Nigerian Army, Commodore Joseph Idet Akinwale Way, and the Inspector General of Police, Alhaji Kam Salem, among others. Aburi was significant for several reasons. First, that the leaders met at all was an achievement in itself. But even more tangible was the fact that the leaders agreed that force would not be used to settle the brothers' palaver. There was also the question of the disposition of Nigerian troops and the reorganization of the army after the second coup on July 29, 1966, and the subsequent killings that followed in May and September. Further, Ojukwu said that his region was perturbed, that contrary to Gowon's promise on August 9, 1966, that all soldiers would return to their region of origin, northern troops still occupied the western region. Gowon replied that his promise on August 9 applied to the repatriation of soldiers of northern origin stationed in the east back to the north, and those of eastern origin stationed in the north back to the east. He had fulfilled his promise, he said. He then emphasized that soldiers of northern origin would remain in the west, since there were only a few Yoruba in the Nigerian army. Ojukwu was not satisfied and further insisted on a reorganization of the army on a regional basis. Gowon was also firmly opposed to splitting up the army. Ojukwu claimed that Nigeria did not have a central government since the country, as a result of the second coup and its aftermath, resolved itself into three separate sovereign areas: the Lagos West-North area, the Midwest area, and the East area. But Gowon insisted that Nigeria was still one nation, an entity composed of 4 regions and a central government in Lagos. Ojukwu then proposed that the situation in the nation necessitated a drawing apart of the regions, because the separation of forces, the separation of the population, is in all sincerity necessary in order to avoid further friction and further killings. The other leaders, who also wanted one Nigeria, agreed to Ojukwu's proposal, but apparently without understanding the implication. This was the bombshell of Aburi. By agreeing to Ojukwu's argument that the regions should be first pulled apart in order to stay together, the other leaders in effect sanctioned Biafra's secession, hence the end of Nigeria as a single nation. They attended and left the Aburi meeting with a firm belief that Nigeria should and would continue as one nation. But they had gone to that meeting, as it seems, without adequate preparations in terms of a crew of legal and political advisors, which such a meeting demanded. They had gone to Aburi in a spirit of comradeship. Ojukwu, on the other hand, meant business. He arrived at Aburi with a strong team of legal, political, and economic advisors, secretaries, and realm of paper. Not only did the other leaders agree with Ojukwu that the regions and people of the nation first draw apart, they also agreed to the latter's suggestion that there be no supreme commander of the army, hence no head of government or head of state. What Ojukwu wanted was that whosoever is at the top should be a constitutional chap, a titular head, but he would only act where, say, we have all met and taken a unanimous decision. Since the unanimous decision of all regions was required before he could act in all matters which affected any of the regions or the nations as a whole, the commander-in-chief and head of government was so only in name. He would still be a titular head. The point of their agreement at Aburi was that each region would be responsible for its own affairs, and that the federal military government would be responsible for matters that affected the entire country. A simple enough concept. Afterwards, the officers toasted their reconciliation and agreement with champagne. The federal government's jubilation was such that on his flight home, Ojukwu asked one of his secretaries whether the federal delegation had fully understood the implication of what had been agreed. However, no one at Aburi other than Ojukwu really understood the constitutional implication of what had been agreed. Ojukwu was obviously delighted with this, hence why he was in such a hurry to implement the decision taken, and why the federal government had to renege on them. Federal permanent secretaries who headed the various ministries of the government as of then, as well as political and legal experts in the country, were appalled at the content of the Aburi Agreement when their leaders returned home. The permanent secretaries met on January 20, 1967 to evaluate the agreement, and they rightly argued that the title of Commander-in-Chief was a subtle way of either abolishing the post of the Supreme Commander or declaring it vacant now that its previous occupant, Major General Aguiyi Ironsi, was dead. They further reported that the proposal that all appointments to top posts in the military, civil service, and the diplomatic corps would be unanimously approved by the Supreme Military Council would tend to paralyze the functions of the Federal Public Service Commission. They also noted that the alliance and loyalty of the regional appointed officers of the federal government would be to regions, meaning in effect that there will be no federal public service. The summary of their report was that the Aburi Agreement summed up to a confederation. The leaders themselves were shocked. The shocking revelation of the meeting of the Aburi Agreement overshadowed some of the important decisions the leaders agreed to at Aburi in their search for peace and for a new basis of a stable federal union, or at least a national unity. Aburi on the whole was a big success, but the interpretation of what transpired at the meeting devalued the success. Ironically, to implement the decisions agreed on at Aburi was necessary. Ojukwu set March 13, 1967 as a deadline for unilateral implementation of Aburi. Gowon, on the other hand, restated that the constitutional changes the East proposed would not work because such changes would result in the end of Nigeria as a single nation. Gowon had given too much away in Aburi that would have led to the destruction of the country. He legalized total regionalism, which would make the center very weak, and a weak center would eventually lead to confederation and total disintegration of the country. While the federal permanent secretaries were evaluating the document to which their leaders were signatories, Ojukwu and the East had grown tougher with their demands. On their own, the other military leaders on March 17, 1967, issued a significant policy, Decree Number 8, which conferred far more powers on regional governments than before. This was deliberately done in the hope that a new and greater degree of decentralization would placate the East so that it would not succeed and a potentially consequent brutal war would be avoided. This Decree Number 8 ignored the report of the permanent secretaries but did not fully concur with Ojukwu's demands. It also decentralized the government to such an extent that the regions were virtually autonomous units, in each of which each regional governor had executive powers. However, Ojukwu would reject the decree because a part of the decree stated that no region shall exercise its executive authority so as to impede or prejudice the exercise of the executive authority of the Federation or to endanger the continuance of federal government in Nigeria. Further, it provided that the Supreme Military Council can also take appropriate measures against a region which attempts to secede from the rest of the Federation and could take over the functions of that region. The part Ojukwu and his Easterners hated the most stated that the federal government could declare a state of emergency in any region which violated any of the above provisions on the consent of the remaining 3 regions instead of the unanimous decision of all the 4 regions. As a result, Ojukwu set March 31, 1967 as the D-Day for the unilateral implementation of the Aburi Agreement, but the East did not succeed. Instead, it seized all federal revenue which came from that part of the country. In the meantime, the Yoruba people were dissatisfied with the presence of troops of northern origin who occupied the western region, and the decision to recruit Yoruba people into the army did little to ease those feelings. So, the Yoruba through Chief Obafemi Awolowo proposed that should the East succeed, the West would feel free to follow suit. The federal government was caught pants down, while Ojukwu and his cohort in the east popped champagne. While the federal government was still trying to steady itself from these revelations, the northern leaders made an astonishing suggestion: the creation of more states. The nation was stunned. The question of the creation of more states, particularly in the north, had been a perennial issue which northern politicians had always resisted, and southerners had accused the north of trying to dominate Nigeria forever. They also believed that the Nigerian crisis would be over if the north accepts that power can be shared. Breaking up the north into more states, which was what the east and other parts of the nation wanted, would provide the answer. The northern decision was a pleasant surprise to most of the nation, particularly the minority people of the north, that is the Middle Belt areas and those of the Cross River or Goja River area, which the secessionists would later claim as part of their government. Because of this, Ojukwu did not agree to the Northern Declaration for the creation of more states. The Westerners, who had been one of the ardent advocates of the creation of more states, felt pleased with the unprecedented Northern move, and they eventually threw their support behind the federal government. Now energized, the federal government was ready for a showdown with authorities in the east, as the authorities in the eastern region executed some acts which provoked the federal government. These acts included seizure of over £200,000 worth of produce belonging to the Northern Region Marketing Board that was in Produc in the east awaiting shipment, the confiscation of 1/3 of the entire rolling stock of the Nigerian Railway, as well as 115 oil tankers. Other acts include the seizure, also at Produc, of a Nigerian Airway DC-3 aircraft, which had left Ikeja Airport earlier on the same day on April 5, 1967. A week later, 3 Igbo gunmen in civilian clothing hijacked another plane belonging to the Nigerian Airways, which was flying from Benin in the Midwest region to Lagos. The federal government immediately halted all further flights to the eastern region. Terrorist activities in Lagos and other parts of the country heightened tension. Before long, the economic sanctions against the East were beginning to bite as a result of an economic blockade of the East in the early May 1967. A few days later, on May 26, 1967, Ojukwu addressed the East's Consultative Assembly consisting of some 300 delegates from all provinces in the East. He declared, and I quote, "There is no power in this country or in all Black Africa that would be able to subdue us by force." It was left to the assembly, Ojukwu continued, to choose one of these 3 alternatives, accepting the terms of the North and go on, and thereby submitting to the domination from the North, or continuing the present stalemate and drift, or ensuring the survival of our people by asserting our autonomy. The assembly got the message. For whatever it was worth, it gave Ojukwu the powers and urged him to declare as an early practicable date for Eastern Nigeria as a free, sovereign, and independent state by the name and title of the Republic of Biafra. The authorities in Lagos had anticipated the move and had prepared for it. On May 27, 1967, Gowon declared a state of emergency for the entire nation and announced that he had assumed full powers for the short period necessary to carry out the measures which are now urgently required. Decree number 8, which was promulgated deliberately to appease the East, was nullified. Gowon also announced that Nigeria was divided into more states, 12 in all. Nigerians were jubilant as the minorities felt secure and out of domination by the majority peoples within the former regions. The northern region was broken into 6 states: Northwestern, North Central, Northeastern, Benue Plateau, Kano, and Kwara, thereby cracking its monolithic posture. The East was broken into 3, the Igbo people having their own state East Central, and the non-Igbo minority people in the East 2 of their own states Rivers and Cross River. The Midwest remained as it was. Some part of the Western region was carved out and merged with the Federal Territory of Lagos to form Lagos State, what remained of the western region became the western states. The creation of more states in the country pushed the East Central state, the Igbo heartland, into an interior pocket, cut off from the coastal oil reserves and its two seaports of Port Harcourt and Calabar. Thus, the lack of seaport for the East Central state was not unique. For the secessionists, the creation of more states was a bombshell, a political reality which they refused to accept or even believe. They began to speed up the withdrawal of the eastern region, which would include, according to them, the two new states of Rivers and Cross River. On May 30, 1967, Ojukwu proclaimed that, quote, the territory and region known as Eastern Nigeria, together with her continental shelves and territorial water, shall henceforth be an independent sovereign state of the name and title, the Republic of Biafra. The new flag was hoisted in public buildings in the east, and the police and army appeared in different uniforms. A national anthem which sounded like Sibelius Finlandia, and which Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe later claimed was plagiarized from his poem Ode to Onitsha, was broadcast. While nothing particularly dramatic happened for the next 30 days, the atmosphere was tense. Though the federal government had her own share of the blames, especially its tardiness after Aburi, she did everything possible to prevent the Nigerian balloon from bursting and to appease the East, to the extent that many Nigerians were doubting whether the federal government was a sick dog that could neither bark nor bite. Nigeria's political instability had now been pushed to its limit. On July 6, 1967, the federal government mounted what she initially termed a police action to arrest the secession. Subsequent events soon showed that it was not a mere police action. It was much more serious than that, particularly with the rebel capture of the Midwest region with another Igbo-engineered plot in the small Bene garrison on August 9, 1967. The assault on the Midwest had been a miscalculation, which led to the Midwest boomerang when the federal military government mounted a counter-offensive with Lieutenant Colonel Murtala Mohammed at the forefront. The succession was now such that it could not be stopped by just a police action, and the result was a 30-month cruel civil war in which over 1 million innocent civilian lives were lost, equipment worth billions of dollars wasted, and thousands of stalwart soldiers on both sides dead. In the end, Biafra surrendered unconditionally, pledged their allegiance to Nigeria, and the civil war officially ended on January 15, 1970.
And I would like, therefore, to take this opportunity to say that I, Major General Philip Effiong, officer administering the government of the Republic of Biafra, now wish to make the following declaration. That we affirm we are loyal Nigerian citizens and accept the authority of the Federal Military Government of Nigeria. That we accept the existing administrative and political structure of the Federation of Nigeria. That any future constitutional arrangement will be worked out by representatives of the people of Nigeria. That the Republic of Biafra hereby ceases to exist.